Wow. And that's the end? Oh no. Oh no. Okay. Uh, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. Okay. Okay, 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 okay. Uh, I didn't write down my thoughts for this game, uh, but I can pretty much say that my overall thoughts have mostly been condensed into a lot of the things that I've been saying throughout the playthrough. And when it really comes down to it, it really does have to do with the fantasy of this game. I just don't feel attached to the fantasy of it. I don't feel like I'm an explorer in a new galaxy trying to learn how to settle new planets with new uh, wildlife and new flora and different atmospheres and all this other stuff. I don't feel like I'm trying to create places that people can live in. I just feel like we start this game and we're like, yeah, we're in this new galaxy. We're gonna settle places, and then we go to this planet and it's like, wow, this planet's not crazy or whatever. And then we find this technology that we've never seen before, and we just like we focus on the technology of the remnant uh instead of everything else, the fantasy essentially. there's there's certainly a good reason to focus on the technology, but I just think in terms of a writing or a narrative standpoint, that's not the direction I wanted this to go. It would have been so much more interesting to me if we saw the technology and we're like, okay, you know, we got to understand this, but we got to find a way to make this place livable. And maybe down the line we start learning more about the technology, we start learning more about the remnant, and we learn that they're terraforming things. But I think they needed to sell me on the fantasy first. And I think they decided to sell me on this is a sci-fi story, I guess. And like I know again these terms are weird, but I wanted to be a pathfinder. And I don't feel like the experience I got was me being a pathfinder. It was just me trailblazing across the galaxy, uh, looking for alien technology, essentially, and fighting this species that we still don't really understand to this day. Um, and maybe some of that's from some of the side quests or what have you, but I think there was a lot that needed to to be conveyed in this game, as far as the main story quests go, and I don't think I got any of that. So I guess I would mostly just say overall thoughts. I think the game is solid. It's a decent game, um, but it doesn't meet the narrative criteria that I feel would have made this game I guess stand above might not be the best way to put it, but it's just I want to not I want to stay away from saying like meets my expectations because honestly, I've played 7 hours of this game before going to this playthrough, and I've heard all the criticisms, so there's very little expectations aside from this game is going to be awful. But yeah, I don't know. I just keep going back to the fantasy. I I wanted that fantasy. I feel like the game told me I was gonna get that fantasy, but then gave me something else. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. Some stuff in the chat. Azuki, you made it right at the last second. Story is super short. The story is pretty short. I don't think it's um I don't think it needs to be longer. Like the length is theoretically fine. I just think they needed to focus on different areas for the story is how I would put it. Uh I mean cuz if you think about it, all the Mass Effect games except for maybe one are pretty short. Everything that you're doing in the Mass Effect games to extend the length are all the side stuff. And truth be told, the side stuff in the earlier Mass Effect games are pretty solid. The team missions and some of the DLC missions, they're fairly interesting. So there is that. 3 felt short. 3 was. I mean, like, yeah, the main story in all the games are pretty short. We could have explored more than just what 5 or 6 planets had helped. I'm not sure we needed the 5 to 6. Like, I don't think we needed more than 5 or 6 planets. I think we needed more diverse areas that like elevated exploration. We see new stuff, new species, new problems. And that would have met it for me. I want to go to a new planet. I want to scan all the plants and be like, how do we make this work? What do we do to the atmosphere? Is there anybody here living that's going to try to stop us, or do we have to
Hey, Sarah.
work with?
I'm getting too used to this. How long?
Weeks. Relax. You haven't missed much.
The Ark and the Sleepers, they're safe in the sphere?
You better like where we parked, because it's home now. The Sleepers wake to an amazing view.
We did it, Dad. What about your implant and Sam?
I am once again helping the Pathfinder activate Remnant. Our connection has been restored to normal.
Normal. You need him again?
I need Sam to make it easier. I was adapting, but damage was being done. We need to be careful, Sarah.
The Nexus leaders are waiting, Pathfinder.
Duty calls. Better not keep them waiting.
It never ends.
All right, we'll get to this. Oh, look at all those failed quests. All right, well, I needed to sneeze, but whatever. So yeah, I don't think we needed more planets. You know what? I would have been happy with 3 planets, and every single planet was completely different, and every single planet had new species, new enemies that were unique to that specific planet, and our focus was trying to survive on the planet, trying to figure out if it's habitable for us, and trying to figure out if if we can coexist with the the rest of the planet's inhabitants, I guess, be it, plant life or bugs or animals or just other sentient species. I I would have just found that more interesting. Trying to figure out how we're going to trade with other species, or scanning a plant and be like, wow, that plant is it's actually alive and it eats people. Seeing that stuff, seeing new interactions that we've never seen before, that we would never expect. Again, selling the fantasy. Ryder, I'm a child with no experience whatsoever, but everyone is counting on me. Commence the show. Let's wait till you get to the end, find something cool, and realize it leads to nothing more. After credits, epilogue. That's where we're at right now. But yeah, I think I would probably. I think that's probably the crux of my thoughts. I like the gunplay in this game. I kind of settled on a specific way that I wanted to use a gun, which is don't worry about my accuracy, just shoot homing bullets, which was a lot of fun. Then I picked up a sniper rifle, and I showed you guys that I can be a decent sniper sometimes. And, it's helpful for the long range battles and things like that. So, I think the gunplay was fine. I think the powers are cool. I wish I could use more than 3 powers. I can see why they wouldn't do that, because consoles only have so many buttons. But yeah, I like the customization of armor. I think the menus in this game are absolutely atrocious. It there's so much unnecessary sub menus and other menus and confirmations. There's a lot of obnoxiousness with the menus, and I yesterday I watched a documentary on, well, not a documentary, but I watched a video from one of the developers that was at BioWare when they made Dragon Age 2. And Dragon Age 2 is one of those, like most hated games by Dragon Age fans or just gamers or what have you, because there was a lot of problems with it. And in that video, they kind of talk about how Dragon Age 1 was built for PC, and then they thought about like consoles later. And then for Dragon Age 2, they were building that game with consoles in mind. And I feel like this game was built for consoles and then ported to PC, as you see with most games or many games out there. But you can feel the the drag, or I guess I can't quite figure out what word I want to say, but you can feel that the consoles slow this game down by a lot. And it really is detrimental to the experience, at least in my eyes. Let's see. The music, I think it was just mostly, Mass Effect music. I don't really have anything for that. I think the voice acting was fine. As far as the graphics go, I'm playing on max settings, so there's, there's some niceness to the visual style of the game. I think a lot of the character models are not that great. I think the animations are fairly stiff. I mean, even just looking at my character right now, kind of just moving around. There's some organicness there, but you can kind of see where the keyframes are starting and ending, and I guess it's just not as clean as not as smooth. And I don't think the Mass Effect franchise is necessarily known for clean animation or anything like that. It's just something that I notice. I think there's a lot of issues with the faces of characters that I think can mostly be pinpointed to the eyes. I think the eyes move around in cutscenes way too much. And, for me, I don't know where my eyes are moving in a conversation. I know I blink a lot, but I feel like when people are having a conversation, their eyes are not moving, every half second or every quarter of a second in such large amounts. It's not that they're moving too much in the sense of a lot of movements. It's that they're moving too far from the origin point. And it should be like micro movements in my eyes anyways. But it also could be that they're also just moving too far distance-wise. And I would say if the developer is watching, I've I've definitely hammered home this whole fantasy thing for me because I felt it was the most important thing that I thought I was going to get from this game. And that might be the wrong way of me trying to say this. It might just be better to say, I feel like the game told me I was going to get a certain fantasy and I ended up just not getting it. And so the expectations I had were set by the game and then not met by the game. And it does kind of feel like a little bit of a bait and switch. We did get exploration. We did get a Pathfinder fantasy, but I just don't feel like it was the fantasy that the game like laid out for itself, I suppose. But again, it's just my perspective, I suppose. If a new Mass Effect game were to come out, I would be fine with it continuing the Andromeda world, I guess. At that point, it's probably safe to say that it's not going to be a exploration kind of thing, which it makes Mass Effect Andromeda a very disappointing thing because you get to miss out on the exploration. In Mass Effect 1, it was off the top of my head, from what I can remember, it was about discovery. It was about, we are already in this galaxy. We already know about all these alien species, but then we stumble upon, like a clue from a species that we've had trouble studying for the entire time. And then we kind of like we start to unravel that. And I think that game does well because it was about the discovery. And I think this game, if it started off with a great exploration, I guess, platform, then we could have moved on to expansion and whatnot. So, yeah. I'd be fine either way. I mean, I'd be fine with it continuing a Shepherd era, I guess, or an Andromeda era, don't necessarily have a big preference. If I were to be honest, I think the story of the Reapers is more interesting, but that doesn't mean that the Andromeda story could be just as interesting or more interesting. But I just saw, man, I glanced at something in the chat. Zuki says it'd be fun to create an alien protagonist, and the immediate thing that popped in my head was, it has nothing to do with what Zuki said, but I would like to see an alien antagonist that is different from the Ket. And I don't think we're going to get that, which is maybe the largest reason, even though it's a very minuscule reason, of why I wouldn't want to see another Andromeda game. Just because the Ket weren't built up as a great villain in this game. They were just an aggressive species, essentially, that didn't want to talk to us. You know, and that wasn't very interesting. They tried to make it interesting, you know, that Ket are basically Angara, but those revelations didn't put all the pieces together. It just basically asked more questions. So yeah, I think that's probably where I'd finish my thoughts on this one. But some more things in the chat. Game is also 5 years old, but the facial animations were the worst. And you're someone who can spend a lot of time in character creation, and the character creation in the game sucked for you. I wasn't that much of a fan of the character creation, but I had an easier time this playthrough than I did when I spent the initial 7 hours of the game. The it must have been like a graphical issue for me, but I do wish there were more customization options. But you know, it's kind of an older game, so you know, you cut it a little bit of slack. You hope it continues in Andromeda. You would love continuing with your rider and having the options of your twin on your team this time. You know, I was actually really expecting Sarah to be a team member, and the longer the game went, it was becoming less and less likely. If I am going to be completely honest, I'd rather not continue with the Ryder family. I'd like to see maybe like a cameo of Ryder, but I'd like to follow a different character. I'm not a big fan of Ryder. Ryder is one of those characters to me that you know, it makes sense. They get thrust into this situation. They don't know what they're doing. But there's just a little bit of arrogance and it's like an amalgam of arrogance and ignorance all at once. And it's kind of frustrating to pilot a character who kind of thinks they know everything, and then they run into so many situations where they know nothing. And you know what? I didn't even talk about Sam either. I really dislike Sam. Sam is, in my opinion, and this is probably not the proper way of describing this, but Sam to me is like a constant Deus Ex Machina. It's it 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 it's part of the fantasy again. But Sam just solves all the problems. Sam has all the answers. Sam knows everything. And when Sam doesn't know everything, Sam will know everything in, you know, Oh, I need to get 2 more signals or something like that. There are some situations where Sam, uh, there are there are some situations where Sam like doesn't know something, and it just makes, I don't know, it's it's just really deflating, I suppose, to play a game where you constantly have to look to another character for answers on something. You can't extrapolate your own thoughts. You can't ask your teammates for their own opinions. You can't study something. It's just all so instantaneous, and it's it was a very obnoxious thing for me because we're in a situation like, oh man, we're surrounded from all sides. What do we do, Sam? Oh, just go this way, open this door, go through there, and I'll qu- uh, modulate our shields so that they ricochet off at the proper times to bounce off and hit the enemies on the other side. And it's like, all right, man, you know, why am I here? Why don't we just build you an ED suit and you handle all this? So yeah, I forgot all about the whole Sam debacle. I've said it multiple times. I think this game would be better without Sam. Never want to see Sam ever again. Sorry, Sam. Not all the Ket are Angara, though, and it'd be interesting to know what other unknown alien races they exalted. Well, so again, this is probably due to some side quests that I didn't do, but I feel like the game did not convey that to me. I have a suspicion that not all Ket are Angara, and I think it makes a lot of sense. But the problem is they showed focus on the Angara are Ket, but they did not show focus on the Solarians are Ket. The Turians are Ket. Oh, humans are Ket. Not even Krogan. They have the Krogan soldiers, but they didn't put focus on the Krogan Arquette. And so I run into the issue of I saw an Angara turn into a perfect Ket, like in likeness. But I didn't see that for anything else. There was just like side illusions to it, if that's how I want to describe it, in the sense of like they might be alluding to it, but it would have just been better to tell us that, because the big mystery here is who is the Ket. The all the soldiers that are from another race and turned into the Ket, like that to me is their process. But who is the Ket? Like, who is the first Ket? How did they go about this process? What did they look like before they started taking in the DNA and whatnot from other species? I mean, I guess you can consider them like the Borg or something like that. But man, if they put more emphasis on the Ket, that would have created a really nice. You know what? They really could have. I mean, maybe they did take inspiration from the Borg, but they probably could have taken a little bit more inspiration from the Borg. Now that I think about it, Sam would absolutely betray us. Like they always say in this game, AI will always eventually turn on their creator. Give him more Ryder's BS personality, and it'll happen. I'm glad I'm not the only one out here that thinks that Ryder has this conflicting, personality that's annoying. There's something said somewhere. You think while normal exploring a planet, so it could be missed, but Ket can't reproduce. They can grow their numbers and race by exalting. Oh, the only way they can grow. Oh yeah, see that? That would have been helpful information. That's your question too. You imagine they had to be someone first besides the Archon. Yeah, and it's if we were to go down the rabbit hole and extrapolate, it's okay. The Ket were a race, and they could reproduce. They were just like any other race out there, and then eventually they started to assimilate another race, and they're like, wow, we got more powerful, and they kept doing that, and eventually they couldn't reproduce anymore, and suddenly, instead of taking in all of the abilities and strengths of other species to make themselves stronger, they started changing species into them to make themselves more stronger, or stronger, not more stronger. And that's probably how they ended up. But man, would it have been cool if this game was like, we're going to tell you about the Ket, we're going to show you about the Ket, and you're going to learn about the Ket. And that is going to be this game, because that would have been a perfect setup for the future. We get this alien race, and that would have been the perfect way to introduce all these other species and see how the Ket's kind of dominance and influence over them has affected the rest of the galaxy. Man, I know everybody on the internet got great ideas, but I'm feeling like I got some nice ideas right now. Man. Maybe the Ket are like the collectors, but the Reapers let them keep their, you don't know how to say it, soul. So they kept their mind, unlike the collectors. So like they weren't indoctrinated completely. After beating this game and not doing the epilogue, I feel like there is no Reaper influence based off of the stuff that's been given. There might be some hints and things like that that I did not see or missed. But I guess that is another thing about this game as well, is that there's, for all intents and purposes, there's no direct correlation to the previous Mass Effect games, which makes sense. This is Mass Effect Andromeda, and the other Mass Effect games are, Mass Effect 1, 2, 3. So if they called this Mass Effect 4 and there was no callbacks or what have you to the previous games, that would be weird. But at the same time, you can't help but see the impact of the events that happened in Mass Effect, the original Mass Effect trilogy, and then wonder how those events are not being reflected in Mass Effect Andromeda. There's no sign of the Reapers in this particular edge of the galaxy or new galaxy, what have you. There's no sign of, like, it's kind of like they wanted to rewrite their own take on the galaxy, but they didn't take into account the ramifications of what actually happened in the Mass Effect trilogy, I suppose. And so I just can't help but feel like there's retcons somewhere in here, or just these tiny changes so that they could weave the story how they want it to. But anyways, that'll wrap it up for my thoughts here. I'm going to do this epilogue. I don't know if I'm tacking this on to my thoughts or not. or if I'm in whatchamacallit. But I'm gonna mark here. Those are my thoughts on Mass Effect Andromeda. Yeah.